Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid!
Yeah, no fear here on Declare Your Independence with me, Ernest Hancock, each and every day here on LRN.com, Liberty Radio Network. And to declare your independence with me, Ernest Hancock, or you can do it all by yourself. You don't need me. You know, how can you declare your independence with someone? Well, you can do it with them. You can do it on your own. I declare my independence. See how easy that was? No government forms. You can do it. You know, the one thing that we're going to do today, let me tell you, we had another guest who's going to be talking from a different perspective on the WikiLeaks thing, but he had a family emergency, so that gives us time to talk. I'm going to reschedule him. But, you know, I told my producer, I go, you know, I'm kind of done on this WikiLeaks thing, you know, until we can get, you know, what's going to be the after on this. Because think about it. I did a radio show this morning in the Midwest, and they wanted to talk about our coverage and a lot of this stuff and our activism here and everything. And you know, my thing is I'm going, you know, this WikiLeaks deal, it's not about Julian Assange plays the Daniel Ellsberg character in the Pentagon Papers. He's not the one that got the information out. I mean, or got it to be put out. He's like the New York Times character. You know, he's the publisher of. This is just like Civil War when Lincoln came out and started thousands of publishers and editors and had their presses destroyed and so on back in the Lincoln administration. Well, since then, when the South went out and said, you know, I break with thee, they go, oh, heck no. Well, who is saying no? The bankers. It always comes down to the money. I care not what laws are made as long as I get to control the money. Well, that's one thing we're going to talk about today. Now, I'm going to play for you a 60 Minutes interview that they did with Meredith Whitney. Now, Meredith, she was with Oppenheimer back in the day, and now she has Meredith Whitney and Associates or whatever, her own investment analytical firm or whatever you want to call it. She has been predicting years before when this stuff happens. And she did analysis of the banking industry, and she's going, look, here we go, and then there it went. Well, now she's talking about municipal bonds, the state debts. Now, each one of the states has their own problems, and this piece will describe that. And one of the things that they go on, here in Arizona, they sold all the government buildings. I mean, the actual Capitol, the Supreme Court building. We call it the Taj Mahal here. Anyway, you ever go into the new Supreme Court building they built, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. It's all marble, granite, and stainless steel and mahogany, and I mean, you know, dang. And what they did is there was a lawsuit that I filed, well, several, and it was to highlight this kind of stuff. Our state constitution, as I'm sure a lot of state constitutions, if not all of them, say that you cannot run a deficit. You can't have a state budget that's not balanced. Well, we saw what they were doing. It was called the Education Overcharge Fund. You know, what it was check kiting. You have a fiscal year that goes from July to June, and what they would do is there was a big check every month that you would send to the education industry. Okay, here it is. Here's June's check. You know what we're going to do? We're going to hold off on June's check. We're just not going to say, we'll wait till July. It'll be a few days. And we'll go ahead and just we'll spend that money, and it's kind of a loan, you know. And the banks would go ahead and hold some of the day. Wouldn't pay it for a few days or a month or something, and then they get caught up. Well, it just kicked the can into the next fiscal year, even though it was a few days. Well, that kept growing. They started doing this under Babbitt. Bruce Babbitt was governor back in the 80s. Well, then he became Interior Secretary under Clinton and all kind. He's politically connected. Sound familiar? So what happened is he did this thing, and it was like went up to like $15 million or something. It's just piddly money. But it set a precedent. Well, it got to be hundreds of millions of dollars. And we filed a lawsuit, went straight to the Supreme Court. If you do lawsuits on your own and you find, because attorneys, they aren't going to touch this stuff. You're going to go challenge the man. Or they're like, oh, heck no, we ain't challenging the man. So they wouldn't touch this thing. So what they did is they just kind of, there's nothing to see here, move along. Well, we were approached by a lot of people. We were doing our newspaper, Citizens Take an Initiative at the time, all the initiatives that were filed and stuff, and we'd do lawsuits. We were activists. So we were approached by a group that was under Fife Symington when he was governor in the early 90s, that they had I'm going to tell you this story because this is the beginnings of all this, and it even started a bit earlier than that. But it was intentional. It was planned. And if you follow it through from the beginning, which I'll do with here before we play the 60-minute thing, so you understand just how bad it was planned to be. It was inevitable what is happening now is going to happen over the next few months. Certainly before the end of 2011, but I mean, I say it's going to be obvious, before March, okay, in the first quarter. Okay, this is what happened. When they were building up this unconstitutional debt, one of the things that they did is they would build these big government buildings, the Taj Mahal, the Supreme Court building. I mean, this was very nice. So what they did, now, of course, who do they need to say this is okay? The Arizona Supreme Court. So what do? They build them a nice building and say, hey, man, this building's gone if you guys don't agree that this is okay to do, and you're first on the list. See? That's how they roll. So what they did is they would build this building. Now, they couldn't do it, the tens of millions of dollars that this thing cost, and still be a balanced budget. So what they would do is they built this building and then leased it back. Now, this long-term, you cannot have a financial obligation that exceeds your debt for that fiscal year. So by building the building and then leasing it back, what they did is they go, hey, man, it's not a long-term debt, which is one of the definitions in the Constitution. Well, can you have a 20-year lease? No. What they would do is have an annual lease that they would renew every year. Well, it's just an annual, of course they know they're going to keep doing it, but, it's kind of, it's all good. It's legal. Well, who determined it was legal? Well, of course, the Supreme Court. So when they were doing this education overcharge fund and they were just, delaying payments, well, how many months do you go? 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. I mean, how long can you drag this out? Well, states and municipalities have been doing this. In Arizona, the city of Phoenix is billions of dollars of budget. I mean, this is huge, just like a lot of places. How much can you take from the people? So this is the lawsuit. There's a rule that nobody ever did. I mean, if you actually read the rules of court, I mean, you just sit there and you go, I see this one. It was, article whatever, rule something. It doesn't matter. Each state's different. And it goes down to this is the rule. If a government agent is required by law to do something and they don't do it, or forbidden by law to do something and they do it anyway, then you can file a special action straight to the Supreme Court. Now, normally by the time you get to the Supreme Court, you got, hand trucks full of boxes full of papers, and you go and find. Mine was like 2-3 pages. And they go, oh, you can't do this, it's not thick enough. I go, hey, man, I know what the law is. So we go through, and finally, that becomes a battle. You go days back and forth, and finally, okay, fine. Because then because I've done this before, I'll file a suit when they won't allow us to file certain paperwork. So we go through this process. There's one case that's called Hancock versus McCarroll. And what it was, I get a lot of attorneys that will come to me and go, hey, man, was that you? They do what's called continuing education for attorneys, and they use this one case as an example of just how screwed up it is. They go through that and they go, oh my goodness, man, they screwed you. I go, yeah, baby, that's what I'm talking about. Just so you understand how bad it is. When we come back, I'll go through and I'll explain to you what happened 15 years ago, and we did it a couple other times, and you can understand what they're doing now and how screwed we all are. We'll be right back. You guys stay there. You're going to want to know this story. We'll be right back.